Al Jazeera podcasts.
Today, will Lebanon's fragile peace hold?
The Israeli military issued a warning of an imminent strike. Minutes later, the sound of an explosion shattered the Friday morning calm.
This was the first strike on the capital since the ceasefire in November. So, how will Lebanon respond? I'm Kevin Hirten, and this is The Take.
I'm Nader Durgham. I'm a Lebanese reporter working with Middle East Eye in Lebanon. I'm currently in the mountains, but usually I'm based in Beirut.
Nader, let's start with the latest. Israel has bombed a residential building in Beirut, the first strike to hit the capital since the November ceasefire. Now, this comes hours after several rockets were launched from southern Lebanon into Israel. So, Nader, give us the nuts and bolts. What do we know so far, and how did this play out?
So, essentially, when the Israeli strike hit the building in Dahir, obviously, it was preceded by hours of very long traffic. People were panicking. For context, people had gone back to their normal lives in Dahia at that point. It was not the war scene anymore. It was, it's still a very, very densely populated area. So it took hours for people to be able to get away from the scene. And once the strike hit, the building that Israel wanted to target was leveled. There was pretty much nothing left.
I looked at the map and it was near my home. I rushed to get my daughter out of school. It was horrific. Children and teachers were crying.
Lots of reports were saying that they wanted to target some underground weapons depot. We do not have much evidence or any real concrete proof of that just yet, but essentially not much was found so far. People had already escaped when the strike happened, and now they're just trying kind of to return to normalcy, but definitely they're very, very shaken.
So there was warning ahead of the attack.
There was a warning ahead of the attack, and they hit a few hours afterwards, not too long, but because it genuinely took so long for people to be able to leave.
Yeah, okay. So we've seen these images of the airstrike and the destruction, people fleeing for their lives. It's all very troubling. Now, Israel says that it flattened this multi-story residential building, claiming it was a drone storage facility. I've seen some preliminary video of people on the ground who are like, where are the drones?
Why would they hit unarmed people? Are there drones here? Where are the drones? It's all plastic all over. Why hasn't everything exploded when they hit? It's a proof that the enemy is a liar.
Has there been any evidence that this was actually a drone storage facility or anything in the rubble so far?
From what we know so far, no, there is no evidence of it being a drone storage facility. Israel has often been accused when they hit buildings at being in Dahia or in southern Lebanon or other areas of Lebanon to be attacking civilian infrastructure. And up until now, with the facts we have, there's no evidence of it being a drone storage facility.
Yeah, I mean, there might be explosives too, you would think, in a drone storage facility. Has anything maybe in the way that the building exploded? I mean, it's so far just no one can find anything.
Yeah, exactly. And that has been the case with many buildings in Dahia that were completely, bombed to the ground, leveled completely. There are many cases where people were not able to find anything. During the war, sometimes due to secondary explosions after a strike, it has led to some people believing that maybe there were actually weapons stored in certain buildings, or there were some cases where things were found. But in general, people have not been able to find much except, those who lived in the building trying to get their belongings. But we're not talking about weapons or Hezbollah ammunition here.
Okay, so these rocket attacks into northern Israel that preceded the Beirut bombing, Hezbollah says flat out it wasn't them. And Lebanon's president echoed that, saying all indications are that Hezbollah was not responsible.
Unfortunately, we have just received news about the south and Beirut, and the return of escalation and tension, and the return of Israeli aggressions on our country and near our capital. It is obvious that we declare our strong condemnation of this and reject any attack on Lebanon or any suspicious, malicious attempt to return Lebanon to the cycle of violence.
So this is prompting a lot of theories and this kind of mystery. If it wasn't Hezbollah, who was it?
Yeah, exactly. Lots of people are wondering that. Now, prior to the war, prior to October 2023, there would be some sporadic occasions where some armed Palestinian groups who operate in the camps in southern Lebanon would fire some rockets at Israel whenever things would get tense over there. Israel would usually reply by, hitting an open field in Lebanon or something like that. So that was one of the theories when the rockets were fired, that maybe it was another one of the loose Palestinian groups, but we do not know yet. And as you said, Hezbollah denied responsibility. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun said that all indications lead him to believe that it was not Hezbollah. So despite him being at odds with the group in several aspects, on that point, he seems to be on the same page as them, believing that if anyone is trying to reignite things with Israel, he does not think it's Hezbollah.
Right. Then there's a lot of reasons to believe that is true. One is that the attack seemed to be quite amateurish, right? It was 2 rockets. It was very ineffective. Hezbollah, and also just the fact that Hezbollah traditionally, when they attack, they do take credit.
Yeah, exactly. And the Lebanese army found the rocket launchers. They, for lack of a better term, look like very kind of primitive launchers, kind of built in a long triangle with aluminum trying to shoot the rockets. And it's different from the previous rocket launchers that were found a week ago, which were made out of wood. But in both cases, at least after the first attack over a week ago, Hezbollah had called the firing methods primitive. These were their words that they told the media. So essentially, usually when Hezbollah fires rockets, they claim responsibility. And they have done that once after the ceasefire in December, when they had accused Israel of violating the ceasefire several times. So they had attacked Israeli troops still stationed in Lebanon on one singular occasion, and they had claimed responsibility and said this is in a response to what they have called Israeli violations of the ceasefire. So everything that happened in the past few days is not really within Hezbollah's playbook as we know it.
Yeah. So, okay, so you said that one of the theories is it's some sort of loosely affiliated Palestinian group. I also heard that could be some sort of loosely affiliated Al-Qaeda group, but potentially responsible. Yeah.
This has been one of the theories. We don't have, evidence to back that up so far. But there have been, maybe not Al-Qaeda, but there have been some Sunni armed groups that have supported Hezbollah during the clashes with Israel throughout the past year. It's not certain. Some Hezbollah supporters have accused Israel of, trying to purposely instigate things using some allies in Lebanon. But again, this is a theory with no backing so far. It's all very mysterious. But what we know for certain is that the Lebanese government and Lebanese security forces are working hard to make sure this doesn't happen again. Israel hit Tahrir last time. We do not know what would happen if another rocket attack takes place.
So it's a mystery that is threatening this very fragile ceasefire. According to Lebanese authorities, during the ceasefire, which started in November, there have been more than 1,250 violations and at least 100 killed. So yeah, fragile would be the word.
Though still officially in place, the truce has seen repeated violations. Israel is accused of breaching it hundreds of times and continues to occupy Lebanese territory.
Can you remind us about some of the terms of the ceasefire and how it's being managed and implemented?
Yes. So from the terms of the ceasefire, Israel was supposed to completely withdraw from southern Lebanon, completely withdraw its army. And from Hezbollah's side, it was supposed to retreat to the north of the Litani River. The Litani River is Lebanon's longest river, and it passes through significant parts of southern Lebanon. So Hezbollah and its weaponry were supposed to retreat to the north of that river to be replaced by the Lebanese army in coordination with UN peacekeeping forces. For the most part, this is what has been taking place. Israel has accused Hezbollah of continuing military activities before the ceasefire's deadline, which was at the end of January, then extended to mid-February. But the Lebanese government said that, the Lebanese army and Hezbollah have been respecting the terms of the ceasefire. On Israel's side, however, by the end of January, Israeli soldiers had not fully withdrawn from Lebanese border towns. And even after the extended deadline, which was in mid-February, Israeli soldiers are still present in what they have called 5 strategic points in southern Lebanon.
Yeah. So the U.S. is part of this 5-nation oversight committee. What role does this oversight committee play, in this sort of tenuous period right now where the ceasefire seems so fragile?
The oversight committee is supposed to, make sure both parties are, or all parties are respecting the terms of the agreement, and that should any violations take place, that it doesn't escalate beyond just said violation. And that is so they have been criticized by many groups in Lebanon for, because Israel has been accused of over 1,000 violations, like you mentioned. But in cases like the incident that happened over the weekend when Israel struck southern Beirut, the Oversight Committee plays a mediating role here to make sure that, things don't escalate beyond that point, essentially.
We'll have more with Nader after a quick break. So Nader, let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is Hezbollah. Earlier this year, on January 9th, after 2 years of deadlock, Lebanon finally elected a president, Joseph Aoun. For this government, the task at hand is pretty monumental, right? It's to exert political and military control over the whole of Lebanon, especially the south, where Aoun has called for Hezbollah to disarm. I wonder if strikes like this make that task easier or tougher for him to achieve that.
The question, both answers can be correct in that case, because on one hand, strikes like this lead many Lebanese people who are opposed to Hezbollah to believe that, to stop being attacked by Israel, we need to disarm Hezbollah. We need to not have this group decide when it wants to attack and things like that. However, for Hezbollah's supporters and generally for people in southern Lebanon, the countless Israeli violations are sending a different message, kind of as if they're saying that the Lebanese government and the Lebanese army cannot protect them. So Southerners will feel like they need kind of reassurances that if Hezbollah is going to leave, is the Lebanese government going to be there for us should we need it?
Yeah.
So that is a very difficult task for the Lebanese government to work on. They need to keep to have the trust of this very significant portion of the Lebanese population. And so far it has been difficult. Israeli attacks that have been, that the Lebanese government has accused them of undermining their sovereignty have made the task very difficult.
Wow. Yeah. So on the one hand, a strike like this strengthens Hezbollah's argument on the need for armed resistance, but it also increases the backlash that Hezbollah might be an obstacle to peace.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. From the Israeli perspective, we're seeing a government that's completely unchained. It's fighting on multiple fronts with very little pushback. Do you think Netanyahu is really interested in seeing Hezbollah completely disarmed? Or is this maybe the preferable scenario for him, like a weakened Hezbollah, an opponent he feels he can defeat?
Well, Netanyahu's actions have been very unpredictable lately. We have seen that in Syria, where the new Syrian authorities have not really posed a threat to Israel just yet, or have not attacked Israel just yet, but Israel has threatened and attacked Syria on several occasions, claiming, security concerns. In Lebanon, Netanyahu might feel emboldened due to Trump's approach to the conflict to take the maximalist stance of basically, I want a completely disarmed Hezbollah. We can't know that for sure. Maybe he could be fine with just a weakened one that's present north of the Litani and not able to really attack Israel, at least not in the way that it did in the past. But if he wants to go for the maximalist approach, at least among his allies, there's not really anyone who would stop him right now.
I guess my question is, what's the alternative to the maximalist approach, right? Hezbollah is supported by Iran. That's where it gets its support, its weapons. If this disarmament plan actually happened, wouldn't the Lebanese army need weapons and support for someone else? Like, would the U.S. be sending arms shipments to Lebanon to replace that power? Would Israel really want that?
Yeah, that is a very good question, actually, because as we know, the Lebanese army receives its funding from the US. Primarily, it is funded also a bit by Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries, but the US is the primary supporter of the Lebanese army. And it is part of a US policy, a very overt US policy, of supporting state institutions against Hezbollah, to have a counter against Hezbollah. Mm-hmm. However, up until now, an argument made is that the Lebanese army does not have the fighting capabilities to actually face off against Israel should any confrontations happen. And the US, is not expected to support the Lebanese army in case it comes face to face with its main ally in the Middle East, Israel.
Like, say Hezbollah really doesn't want to disarm, they would need to have some sort of force that could disarm them.
Yeah.
And that would require a lot of manpower, weapons. I wonder if Israel really wants the Lebanese army to have that kind of firepower.
Yeah. Probably, I would say, at least basing off, statements from Israeli officials and Israeli media, while some officials, including Netanyahu, would say overtly that they respect the Lebanese army, in action, they do not seem to support having a strong enough Lebanese army to be an alternative Hezbollah, essentially.
Lebanon is responsible for what comes out of its territory, and it needs to ensure that nothing comes out of it. No attacks should be launched from its territory towards the state of Israel. We respect the state of Lebanon and its army, and therefore we demand from them what you would demand from someone you respect.
And to disarm Hezbollah, it might, if you want to do it by force, right now, there are little scenarios that do not lead to a complete civil conflict in Lebanon. Yeah. Disarming by force would be catastrophic internally, at least. And if we want to talk about the Israeli position, Israel is very clear about not wanting chaos on its borders. So I do not know if it would favor a complete civil war up in its northern neighbor.
Well, that's why I'm glad we're talking about this, because every path you walk down has its own traps. Yeah. It's really hard to see this happening. And with that in mind, let's just end in Lebanon. Give us an early review of how this new government is faring. What are the immediate challenges ahead, and why this is such a critical moment for the country?
It's an incredibly critical moment because, for starters, we are nearly 6 years into a complete economic collapse that Lebanon's experiencing starting in 2019. And the economy has not really recovered since then. Add to that, the Beirut port explosion of 2020 and the war that took place in the end of 2024. There are a lot of grievances, economic grievances, as well as war grievances and personal grievances among people, and political ones as well. So the new government so far is trying to play a balancing act. There's definitely American and Arab influence on the new government. That is for certain, and that is not a hidden fact. The US is very overt over when it talks about who it supports in the Lebanese government at the moment, including Lebanese President Joseph Aoun. And it's a difficult task, essentially. Hezbollah is part of the new government. It has 2 ministers, and its ally Amal has 2 other ministers. One of the more interesting developments lately is that Hezbollah supported the arrival of the new central bank chief, Karim Said, even though he has very, anti-Hezbollah positions and released pieces that kind of call for the disarmament of the group. However, if Hezbollah's ministers voted for him and helped him reach that position, it's a complicated game. Lebanese politics are never straightforward, but it seems that all groups are trying to find kind of a middle ground. Hezbollah is not the biggest fan of the new government, it being the president or the prime minister, and it doesn't really hide that fact, but they're not in a full-on confrontation, not politically, not physically. So I think all groups are trying to play their cards very carefully at the moment.
Yeah, it's been an extraordinary 5 years. And the sense I get from talking to my friends in Lebanon is just people are exhausted. Is that something that you feel as well, someone who lives in Beirut, that people just want things to turn back to normal, whatever that means?
Yeah, honestly, conversations I've had with friends, with people I'm interviewing, with family, people are just genuinely exhausted. They can't take waking up every morning to what new crisis they're going to be facing every single day. And after the war, I think the war has led to people even missing the economic crisis days where, it was a slow burn, but the war was so accelerated, so intense that, I guess the few weeks after the ceasefire where some sense of normalcy returned to Beirut, you would feel that people were actually a bit happier. But events like the things that happened over the past few days are a reminder that we are not back to normal. We are not to pre-2019, and maybe we cannot go back to pre-2019. The economic system, political decisions that took place over the past decades are what led Lebanon to the crisis it is in now. So some might tell you there needs to be radical change, but the population as a whole seems to be too exhausted to even give radical change an attempt right now. They just want to live their lives normally as possible.
Okay. Well, Nader, thank you very much for coming on The Take today.
Thank you for having me.
And that's The Take. While you're here, let us know what else you think we should be covering. Just write a note down in the comments and we will read them, I promise. And if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and keep following every single episode. We'll be back tomorrow.